Have you ever faced a moment when the odds seemed stacked against you? When doing the right thing required unimaginable bravery? Welcome to Bible-Inspired Stories, a channel dedicated to bringing to you lessons from the inspired Word of God. We cannot do it alone. Your support will go a long way to encourage us to keep creating more inspired videos. Today, we're looking at one of the most extraordinary stories of courage, faith, and strategy from the Bible, the story of Queen Esther. This is a story about how one young woman, armed with fasting, prayer, and courage, changed the course of history for her people. So, grab a seat and let's explore the incredible account of Queen Esther and how she won a spiritual and political battle that seemed impossible. Esther's story begins in the Persian Empire under the rule of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. The king had dismissed his former queen, Vashti, for refusing to appear at his banquet, and the search was on for a new queen. Esther, a young Jewish woman, was among the many candidates brought to the palace. Despite her humble beginnings, she found favor with the king and was crowned queen. But Esther's rise to royalty was no coincidence. She was placed in this position by God for a purpose that would soon unfold. At the same time, a dark plot was brewing in the palace. Haman, a high-ranking official, had a deep hatred for the Jewish people, especially Esther's cousin and guardian, Mordecai, who refused to bow to him. Filled with rage, Haman convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree to annihilate all the Jews in the empire on a specific day. The Jewish people were in grave danger. Imagine the fear and despair that swept through the community as they realized their lives were at stake. But amidst this darkness, there was hope that rested on Esther. When Mordecai learned of Haman's plot, he sent a message to Esther, urging her to plead with the king on behalf of her people. But Esther faced a significant challenge. According to Persian law, anyone who approached the king without being summoned could be executed, unless the king extended his golden scepter. Esther had not been summoned for 30 days, and the risk was real. Mordecai's response to Esther's hesitation is one of the most famous passages in the Bible. He said, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Those words stirred something deep within Esther. She realized that her position as queen was not just a privilege but a responsibility, a divine calling to stand in the gap for her people. And so, she made a decision that would change everything. Esther didn't rush into action. She understood the magnitude of the situation and knew she needed divine guidance. So, she called for a 3-day fast. She said to Mordecai, "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Fasting is a powerful spiritual discipline. It is a way to humble ourselves before God, seek His will, and prepare our hearts for the battle ahead. By fasting and praying, Esther aligned herself with God's purposes and invited His intervention in her situation. The entire Jewish community joined her in this fast. Imagine thousands of people crying out to God with one voice, pleading for deliverance. This was not just Esther's battle, it was a collective act of faith. After 3 days, Esther dressed in her royal robes and approached the king. Picture the tension in the room as she entered uninvited, knowing her life was on the line. But God's favor was with her. When the king saw Esther, he was pleased and extended the golden scepter, allowing her to speak. Instead of immediately pleading for her people, Esther showed wisdom and patience. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, she invited them to yet another feast the next day. This wasn't hesitation, it was strategy. Esther was setting the stage for her request. Meanwhile, Haman was plotting his final revenge against Mordecai. He had a gallows built, intending to hang Mordecai the next day. But God was already working behind the scenes. That very night, the king couldn't sleep. He ordered the royal records to be read to him and discovered that Mordecai had once saved his life by exposing a plot against him. The next morning, the king honored Mordecai in a public display of gratitude, an act that humiliated Haman. At the second banquet, Esther finally revealed her identity as a Jew and exposed Haman's plot. She said to the king, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. The king was furious when he learned that Haman had plotted to kill the queen and her people. Haman was executed on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The king issued a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves, and they were saved from destruction. Esther's story is more than a historical account. It's a blueprint for courage, faith, and spiritual victory. First, it teaches us the power of positioning. Esther realized that she was placed in the palace for a divine purpose. Similarly, God has placed each of us in specific roles and positions to make a difference. Second, it highlights the importance of fasting and prayer. Esther didn't rely on her own strength or beauty to win the battle. She turned to God and sought His guidance. Finally, it reminds us of the power of courage. Esther faced her fears and took a stand, even at great personal risk. Her bravery not only saved her people, but also demonstrated the power of faith in action. So, what battle are you facing today? Remember, like Esther, you are not alone. God is with you, and He has equipped you with everything you need to face the challenges ahead. Seek Him through prayer, humble yourself through fasting, and step forward with courage. Thank you for watching, and if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more faith-filled content. Let Esther's story remind you that with God, even the most impossible battles can be won. See you in the next video.